In May 2026, President Trump flew to Beijing with a delegation of some of America's most powerful CEOs: Elon Musk, Tim Cook, Larry Fink, Boeing's Kelly Ortberg. It was supposed to be one of the biggest US-China business summits in years. But on Chinese social media, the biggest star of the trip was not the president, and it was not Musk. It was a man in a black leather jacket, standing outside a tiny noodle shop in one of Beijing's oldest alley districts, eating a bowl of jjiangmian, Beijing-style noodles with fried soybean paste, on the sidewalk. Someone handed him a cup of douzhe, fermented mung bean juice, a traditional Beijing drink known for its sharp, sour taste. He took a sip. His whole face crumpled. The clip went viral instantly, trending across Chinese social media, crossing 1 million views on X by Friday morning. The man was Jensen Huang, co-founder and CEO of Nvidia, the most valuable semiconductor company on Earth, one of the richest tech founders in the world, and more importantly, the man running the company at the center of the global AI boom. And there he was, wincing on a Beijing sidewalk, then buying a milk tea from a nearby shop to recover. When a reporter asked how he felt about China, he said 3 words: "I love China."
Jensen, how do you like China?
I love China.
Yeah? Do you
We're
plan
having
to
a great
visit?
time.
But 5 days earlier, his name was not on the White House delegation list. He was not supposed to be in Beijing at all. Then something changed. According to CNBC, Trump saw the media coverage of Huang's absence, picked up the phone, and called him directly. Huang caught a flight to Anchorage, Alaska, and boarded Air Force One during a refueling stop. But the real question is, why did Jensen Huang have to catch Trump's plane to Beijing at the last minute? This was not a cute China travel moment. It was a business crisis hiding inside a viral street scene. And the reason is hidden in one brutal number. In October 2025, Jensen Huang appeared at a Citadel Securities event in New York and said something that shocked the industry. His exact words: "At the moment, we are 100% out of China. We went from 95% market share to 0. Just 3 years earlier, nearly every AI chip running in a Chinese data center was made by Nvidia. Then Washington banned the A100 and H100, then restricted the downgraded H800, then pulled back the H20, a chip Nvidia had specifically designed to comply with export rules, round after round, until there was nothing left to sell. And this is the context you need to understand why Jensen Huang scrambled to Alaska, boarded a presidential plane, and showed up in Beijing eating noodles on the street. Despite what social media commenters joked, he was not there for a vacation. He was trying to claw back a market that had already slipped away. But the key point is this: Huang was not just trying to win back a chip market. He was trying to win back a market where Nvidia's entire ecosystem had already taken root. And to understand how that ecosystem was built, you have to go back to 1993. When Jensen Huang co-founded Nvidia, the company was mainly building graphics chips for video games. If you have ever played PC games, you have almost certainly used an Nvidia GPU. But what makes Nvidia different from almost every other chip company is a decision it made back in 2006. It launched a software platform called CUDA that lets developers use GPUs for general-purpose computing, not just rendering game graphics, but running complex calculations at massive scale. Wall Street was skeptical at the time. A graphics card company building a software ecosystem did not fit any analyst model. But Wall Street getting it wrong is hardly a new phenomenon. And sure enough, they got it wrong again. When ChatGPT exploded at the end of 2022, the world suddenly discovered that training large AI models requires enormous amounts of compute, and nearly all of it runs on Nvidia GPUs. Not just because the hardware is fast, because CUDA, after 15+ years of accumulation, has become something close to an operating system for AI development. Researchers, engineers, and cloud platforms worldwide write their code on CUDA. Switching chips is one thing. Switching ecosystems is something else entirely. Think about why Apple and Microsoft have stayed dominant for decades. It is not because they make the best individual products every single year. It is because they built ecosystems, app stores, developer tools, operating systems, user habits, that are so deeply embedded in how people work and live that switching away becomes almost unthinkable. CUDA works the same way for AI, and Nvidia built exactly that kind of ecosystem in China. Nvidia has been operating in China for 3 decades, It has offices in Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Guangzhou, with over 2,000 employees in Shanghai's Pudong district alone. Huang visited China 3 times in 2025, and at one point even swapped his signature leather jacket for a traditional Tang suit at a Beijing expo, where he delivered his first-ever public speech in Chinese. China was central to Nvidia's global strategy, and Nvidia knew it. In fact, both Huang and Nvidia's CFO Colette Kress have publicly claimed that China's AI chip market could reach $50 billion within the next few years. Now, that is not an independent estimate. It is Nvidia's own number, cited repeatedly while lobbying Washington to loosen export controls. The bigger the figure sounds, the stronger the argument that America is losing. So take it with a grain of salt. But even if the number is inflated, the point still stands. China is too big for Nvidia to ignore. For comparison, the entire US AI chip market was valued at roughly $29 billion in 2025. The global total stood at around $100 billion. Even a conservative read of China's demand puts it among the largest AI chip markets on Earth, possibly the largest. This is not a market any company can afford to walk away from. Before the export controls tightened, China accounted for roughly 20 to 25% of Nvidia's data center revenue. Tencent, Alibaba, ByteDance, Baidu, all of them were buying Nvidia GPUs at scale for cloud infrastructure, large model training, and autonomous driving. These were not one-off purchases. They were recurring, high-volume, ecosystem-building relationships. When Washington shut that door round by round, Nvidia did not just lose revenue. It lost the customers whose usage was reinforcing CUDA's dominance in the world's fastest-growing AI market. And that absence created an opening that others were quick to fill. Because during the years Nvidia was locked out, the vacuum did not stay empty. Huawei's Ascend 910C has become the default training accelerator for China's largest AI labs. DeepSeek, one of China's most closely watched AI startups, released its V4 model in early 2026, the first major Chinese frontier model to run training natively on Huawei's architecture. Cambricon, a company once mocked as a cash-burning storyteller, delivered a staggering turnaround. Revenue surging over 4,300% in the first half of 2025, with its stock price briefly surpassing Kuaichao Maotai's to become the most expensive stock on China's A-share market. China has not fully replaced Nvidia, but it is being forced to learn how to live without Nvidia. And Nvidia's real fear is not that it loses one batch of chip sales today. It is that, after several years of absence, Chinese AI companies quietly become comfortable building on another system. Huang himself had warned US policymakers about exactly this. Restricting Nvidia's chip sales would not stop China's AI development. It would accelerate China's effort to build its own chip ecosystem. That warning is now playing out in real time.
In the AI race, and I think the policymakers all want to do the right thing, and they want America to win. However, it's important to be mindful that what harms China could oftentimes also harm America, and even worse.
But not everyone agrees with Huang's framing. In April 2026, Silicon Valley podcaster Dwarkesh Patel sat down with Huang for a long interview. It started as a conversation about Nvidia's moat, TPU competition, and AI infrastructure. But it quickly turned into a sharp debate over the question Huang has been trying to answer on every stage and in every boardroom. Should America sell advanced AI chips to China? Huang's argument was that if Nvidia is pushed out, China will not stop building AI. It will build around Huawei, Cambricon, and its own domestic stack. In his view, selling Nvidia chips is not just about revenue. It keeps Chinese AI developers inside the American technology ecosystem. But Dwarkesh pushed on the part Huang could not easily escape. If advanced chips give China more effective AI capability, then this is not just a normal export. It is a strategic transfer of compute. And if that compute can help build stronger models, including models that may be useful for cyber, military, or intelligence purposes, why should Washington treat it like an ordinary product? That is the real debate hiding underneath this trip. Not whether Nvidia wants China. Of course it does. The harder question is whether keeping China tied to America's tech stack is worth giving China more of the compute it wants. As it turns out, Washington did crack the door open. Just a little. You might expect that the moment export restrictions loosened even slightly, Chinese companies would line up to buy Nvidia chips again. That is not what happened. Washington had started allowing Nvidia's H200 chips to be sold to a limited group of Chinese buyers. Alibaba, Tencent, ByteDance, JD.com, and several other top Chinese firms were reportedly given purchase licenses. Each company could buy up to 75,000 chips. On paper, it sounded like a breakthrough, but the fine print told a very different story. For every H200 Nvidia sells into China, 25% of the sales revenue would go directly to the US government. Think about that for a second. This is not just a chip sale anymore. It is a chip sale with a built-in American tax. And that was not the only problem. The chips would also come with strict monitoring, inspection, and usage controls. From China's perspective, that creates an obvious question. If the hardware, the supply, the performance limits, and even the rules of use are all shaped by Washington, can this really be called a stable supply chain? Then there is the chip itself. H200 is powerful, but it is not Nvidia's newest flagship. It is still behind the latest B200 generation. So from Beijing's point of view, China would be paying a premium, accepting American oversight, taking on security concerns, and still not getting Nvidia's best technology. That is why the result felt so surreal. America said, "You can buy now." But China's real response was closer to, "At what cost?" But painting this as a simple story of Chinese self-sufficiency would also be wrong. The reality has another side. Huawei's Ascend 910C still trails Nvidia's H200 on key performance benchmarks. According to multiple analyses, Huawei will not produce a chip matching H200 performance until late 2027, and even if the chip is ready, production capacity is a separate bottleneck. Huawei's ability to manufacture advanced node chips currently sits at roughly 1 to 4% of US levels. And then there is CUDA. It is not just a developer tool. It is an entire ecosystem. Libraries, frameworks, optimizers, debuggers, community resources built up over 15 years. Cambricon and Huawei are both constructing their own software stacks, but replacing CUDA comprehensively takes time. China's real strategy is not to abandon Nvidia tomorrow. It is something more nuanced. Use Nvidia when available, but never again depend on Nvidia as the only path. So this is not a story of one side begging the other. Both sides need each other, while simultaneously preparing for the possibility that the other side becomes unreliable. Mutual dependence, mutual suspicion. Neither willing to fully let go, neither willing to fully commit. And here is where the story gets even more uncomfortable for Nvidia. It is not only fighting for access in China, it is now being watched by both systems, but for opposite reasons. In the United States, Nvidia may be too powerful. Regulators are scrutinizing whether it can lock in customers, dominate the AI chip market, and block competitors. The Department of Justice has reportedly been examining Nvidia's business practices. In an era when AI is being described as the most important technology of the century, a company that controls the core compute layer is inevitably going to attract antitrust attention. In China, the concern is different. China worries not only that Nvidia is powerful, but that Nvidia is unreliable, because access to its chips can be cut off by Washington at any moment. Beijing has launched its own regulatory reviews of Nvidia, including antitrust investigations. The message is not subtle. If you want to operate here, you need to prove you can be a stable, long-term partner. And right now, Nvidia cannot make that promise, because it does not fully control whether its own products are allowed to be sold. But here is the strange part. Despite all of this, the export bans, the regulatory scrutiny, the political tension, Jensen Huang is still welcomed in China. At the state banquet in the Great Hall of the People, Elon Musk went viral for all the wrong reasons. Sitting alone, making faces while a parade of executives lined up for selfies with him, then pulling out his phone to record the venue, spinning in circles like a tourist while a major diplomatic summit was happening around him. Entertaining, but pure Musk. He does not want to look like everyone else in the room. He wants to be the one who plays by different rules. Now compare that with Huang, standing on a sidewalk, eating noodles with regular people, wincing at fermented bean juice, buying a $3 milk tea. He is ethnically Chinese, born in Taiwan, speaks Mandarin, and has a natural familiarity with the culture that is very difficult to fake. That kind of ease does not come naturally to most billionaires. The reason is that Huang spent his early years in America washing dishes and cleaning toilets. Those hard years shaped who he is. He knows when to lower his posture, and in China, that ability matters more than most Western observers realize. The more both sides worry about Nvidia, the more it proves Nvidia still matters. America still needs Nvidia to keep its technology at the center of global AI, and China still needs world-class compute to keep moving fast. That is why Huang matters. "I love China" is not a love letter. The noodles were not just breakfast. They were goodwill signals from one of the few people who can still speak to both sides without immediately triggering rejection. There is a useful contrast on the same trip. Boeing CEO Kelly Ortberg was also on that flight to Beijing. Boeing had not landed a major Chinese aircraft order in nearly a decade. During the visit, Trump announced that China would buy 200 Boeing jets. China's Ministry of Commerce confirmed the deal. Boeing issued a statement saying it had successfully reopened the China market. On the surface, Boeing and Nvidia were both chasing Chinese deals. But what they are actually fighting for is fundamentally different. If Boeing loses the China market for several years, airplanes are still airplanes. Once orders return, production can be scheduled again. But if Nvidia is absent from China's AI ecosystem for several years, the loss is not a few contracts. It is an entire generation of developer habits. Boeing is fighting for an order, Nvidia is fighting for an ecosystem, and ecosystems, once lost, do not come back on a delivery schedule. So let's come back to that small noodle shop in a Beijing alley. Huang seemed to be enjoying himself, the crowds, the cameras, the street food. But the pressure behind that smile is something probably only he truly knows. He wanted to prove that Nvidia can still be trusted in China. He also wanted to prove that Nvidia can still find some room to do business between Washington and Beijing. But that room is shrinking. Because when chips become national strategy, a company can no longer be just a company. Nvidia becomes more important as it becomes more powerful. But the more important it becomes, the less freedom it has to act like a normal business. The ticket back into China's AI future is no longer decided only by customers, prices, or technology. It is decided by the strategic calculations of two superpowers. Nvidia may be the most powerful AI chip company in the world, but in this fight, even Nvidia is not fully in control of its own future. If you found this breakdown useful, hit like and subscribe. And I am curious, do you believe Nvidia can win back the China market, or has that window already closed? Drop your take in the comments. I will see you in the next one.